So, good evening, and I really do thank you for not just the opportunity to talk to you tonight, but for being able to participate in this incredible event, because it's clear this is a really awesome unit, and anyone would really be fortunate to be a part of that. But by the time I am done tonight, I plan to make each of you better at your jobs so you can better prepare our units for future conflicts, as well as help you live your best life within and outside the service. So the stuff I'm going to talk about tonight, it's not just for your job in the Army, but it'll also apply to other places in your life and for those who aren't actually in the service. It's 2009, and the village of Said Keel is a communication dead zone. Radios are useless, cell phones are useless. An Afghan boy lays injured in the street after being hit by a U.S. Humvee. A growing crowd gathers, and our small team tries to remain calm. As team commander, I'm striving to figure out a good solution when a convoy of armed Afghans enters the village. These are the situations for which we spend months and years preparing as soldiers and leaders. There was a time when our preparation focused almost exclusively on kinetic battles. Combat units prepared for the fight while other units prepared to support the fight or deal with the aftermath. Our individual soldier skills and collective battle drills were designed around direct and indirect fire situations. That changed drastically during OEF and OIF as we moved towards COIN, counterinsurgency, and as technology completely changed the media. Battle lines were no longer linear if they existed at all. Our actions could be recorded and broadcast to thousands, eventually millions, almost instantly. The battlefields were now areas filled with non-combatants, many children. Our Army doctrine has changed again from COIN to LSCO, large-scale combat operations, in which fighting will again be highly kinetic with significant reliance on indirect fire, as well as multi-domain fighting, such as what we're seeing in Ukraine. However, that doesn't mean we can forget the lessons we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan. Rather, we have to heed those lessons and apply them to the newer doctrine. And you here, the observer controller trainers, and those who are supporting them, have an absolutely critical role in ensuring future deploying Army Reserve and other component units are prepared to do just that, prepared for that new LSCO environment. Now, I've not attended a CSTX at Fort Hunter Liggett, but I expect the basics are similar to Fort McCoy, which is to say significant emphasis on dealing with non-combatants in the media, as well as multi-domain threats such as drone and cyber attacks. These are difficult to battle drill. They require leaders to think critically in planning and to effectively communicate missions so subordinates can execute commanders' intents. They require soldiers and teams to continually adapt to constantly evolving situations. Preparing units and leaders to do that requires you as OCTs to model Army professionalism and focus your feedback to the units on their ability to lead effectively through critical thinking, problem solving, mission command, and clear communications. Of course, you have checklists and rubrics. Okay, they help guide your evaluations, but at the end of the day, battle-ready units, soldiers, and leaders must be able to think critically, solve problems, communicate effectively, and execute mission command. Consequently, you as OCTs have to adopt, internalize, and then model those same traits. Over the next 20 or so minutes, I'm going to tell you how to do that. And by the way, these apply anywhere, anytime. All these lessons, they aren't just for your role as OCTs. Okay, and that includes for the non-service members that are here. This applies to you. So let's first talk about Army professionalism. Our Army, in order to achieve its potential and be as effective as possible, we must be an army of professionals. And being a professional doesn't mean you're just getting paid. It means living by a code and adopting a culture based on values. It then means holding ourselves and other soldiers accountable to that code and culture and those values. However, we can't wait for others to do that. We have to choose to hold ourselves accountable and set the example of professionalism as we help others do the same. You do that with your teams or your units, and then you model that in your roles as OCTs. You should also do that with your families, your civilian jobs, with your friends, and with others outside the military. All those values apply everywhere. If you do this, and I mean truly do that, okay, not just give it lip service, but it's going to improve your life along with the lives of those around you. And I'll talk a little bit later specifically about how that happens, why that happens. So what does it look like? Put simply, being an Army professional is living the Army values. Values, by the way, that again apply all the time. They're not just when we're wearing the uniform. Okay? Or, oh, I can give them up now, I'm retired, right? No way. You should know these because they're included in every PME course somewhere. Okay? So, we'll do a little quiz here. All right, using the leadership acronym, what are the Army values? So what's the L? Loyalty. Excellent. What's the D? Duty. What's the R? Respect. What's the S? Self-service. H? Honor. I? Integrity. And P? Personal courage. Excellent. 7 Army values, right? Unfortunately, few of us have really internalized these and lived these values constantly, but a large part of that is because the world we live in makes it so difficult. We're confronted with things on a day-to-day basis that makes it hard to live those values day to day. And I really wish I had the time and the opportunity to delve deeply into each of these values. But given it's already getting late and people are ready to relax a little bit, we'll keep it moving. So I'm going to do a quick look at each of these values, okay, beginning with loyalty. Now, loyalty is a two-way street. Okay? It's not blind loyalty. Loyalty, so if someone or an organization or institution betrays our trust, okay, we have to determine if we can continue to be loyal to that individual or organization while being honest and honor our own values. Don't compromise your values, especially your integrity, under the guise of being loyal, because that's not what loyalty requires. Many individuals and organizations, and unfortunately a lot of politicians and political organizations are guilty of this, they try to guilt us into a form of false loyalty after they have compromised their values and their integrity. The extent of loyalty that we owe, whether it's to an individual or an organization, is to try and help them restore their honor by returning to their core values. And if they won't do that, they are the ones being disloyal, not us. And we often forget that because we're so caught up in wanting to be loyal to someone who we've felt that way about, that when they violate our trust, we have trouble letting that go. But we have to make sure we're not compromising our own loyalty, our own integrity. Duty. So this is more easily understood as responsibility. We each need to uphold our duties or responsibilities, but within our ability to do so. We often are told by others, or we adopt this sense that we're responsible for something that we don't have power and control over. And when we don't have power or control over something, we can't truly be responsible for it. Oftentimes, the things we think we're responsible for, we've negotiated with somebody. So we're going to get a reward or face a consequence if we don't fulfill them. But in trying to address things that we think we're responsible for, but we're not, it draws our attention away from things over which we do have power and control and for which we are responsible. And that form, trying to address things over which we don't have power and control, causes stress and anxiety, which is a challenge as well. So I'm actually working on a book on this topic, and I could spend hours on it alone, so I'm going to move on. Respect. This means respecting everyone until they give us a reason not to. Okay? And a lot of times we do the exact opposite. We expect someone to earn our respect. Okay? And therefore we make judgments about them based on what our first impressions. When in fact, the Army value is we should respect everyone until they give us a reason not to. And if we do that, we will find ourselves being more open to listening to other people, okay? And we'll actually be rewarded because people will surprise us who we maybe wouldn't have given the time of day to based on our first impressions. Selfless service. All of you have demonstrated this value by agreeing to make sacrifices to serve in the military or to support someone else who serves, or both. So we all understand this particular value. Selfless service, that's one I just did. Honor is living the other values 24/7. So honor really encompasses all of the values because it's about always doing the right thing, which is integrity, doing it for others, which is respect and loyalty, regardless of the cost, which is selfless service and duty, and even in the face of overwhelming circumstances, which is personal courage. But it's also hard to do that in everyday life. So again, something just to be thinking about. And then finally, integrity. Integrity is doing the right things the right way and for the right reasons. So think Steve Rogers, Captain America, the first Avenger. Right? Now, there are two huge obstacles to living with integrity. The first is hypocrisy, which is the opposite of integrity. If we don't walk the talk, we're being hypocrites. Okay? Our actions don't match our words or our values. Okay? So that's number one. But the second obstacle, and the way we compromise our integrity so often, is allowing the ends to justify the means. Unfortunately, this has become so pervasive in our society that few of us even recognize it or recognize how dangerous it is. We have become so accustomed to everyone compromising their values and justifying it because it'll achieve some end that they want or that we want, that we hardly blink when it happens. But to justify the means, by definition, so when you use the ends to justify the means, by definition, you are compromising your integrity or another value. Because if you didn't have to compromise, you wouldn't have to justify. And so again, we do it, we'll say, well, if this is the outcome I'm going to get, it's worth doing this. But in fact, there's an alternative, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. So that leads to the final value, personal courage. We tend to equate personal courage with acts of bravery. I served in Afghanistan with then Captain Will Swenson. During the Battle of Ganjgal, where an Afghan army unit and their mentors were ambushed en route to a key leader engagement, Captain Swenson, over the course of several hours, repeatedly drove into the battle space, into direct fire from AK-47s, machine guns, and RPGs in an unarmored Toyota pickup truck to rescue Afghan soldiers and retrieve the bodies of 4 Marines who were the mentor team for that Afghan army unit and their interpreter. He retrieved them, he got them out of the battle space, going in repeatedly. Unfortunately, Captain Swenson also lost his NCOIC, Sergeant First Class Ken Westbrook, who was injured. He was evacuated, but later died of his injuries. Captain Swenson showed personal courage that day, and for it, he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. But Captain Swenson also showed personal courage and several other Army values when he submitted his report on the battle. He was fully honest in his assessments, despite knowing it could cost him personally and put his career at risk. Captain Swenson left the service for a period, and his medal packet was apparently lost or delayed for several years. Eventually, the packet made it through, and he did receive the award, and he did return to the service. They convinced him to come back. Okay, but obviously that shouldn't have happened. It can be difficult to show personal courage when we're not in a crisis. But doing so is usually the only way to live the Army values throughout all areas of our lives. And if we all did that, we would actually avoid many crises to begin with, just by following our values. Now, what might this look like for an OCT? As an OCT, you should show respect for every soldier you encounter, from private to CSM, from second lieutenant to general, and for warrant officers if you can find one. You got to be in the Army to know that joke. You should show loyalty to the Army and your mission by truly holding each unit to the required standards, but then also making sure that they understand their shortcomings and how to address them, how to improve. Demonstrate selfless service by not taking shortcuts, by being with them throughout the crappiest parts of the exercise, by not eating their food and drinking their coffee unless invited to do so, okay? And by listening to them and their thoughts and ideas. Show personal courage by not giving in to temptations by maybe fellow OCTs or others who want to take shortcuts, shorten the workday, okay, not complete your reports and feedbacks to the expected standard and quality. Remember that the quality, the integrity of the feedback of your work as OCTs can be the difference between a unit being able to execute during a deployment and being battle ready on paper. Sorry, doesn't everybody hate this? I don't even know why I do that. I put quote marks sometimes in my thing, and I conducted an investigation of a unit post-deployment that should never have been approved as being ready. They should never have been deployed. And that is exactly what I put in my report. I don't think the state leadership in the Wisconsin Guard was happy about that. It was really a miracle. No lives were lost, but the outcome was actually catastrophic anyways. Now, everything I just talked about was to cover the Army values and being an Army professional. But guess what? All of that applies to the other traits that I said that you need to model as OCTs and that our units need to prepare on. Critical thinking requires you to have integrity and show respect. So you have to have integrity in order to acknowledge your own personal biases and account for them while you're thinking critically. Because our biases tend to push us toward a certain answer, towards a certain solution. So we have to think critically to know my bias is this, and I need to account for that so that I don't go straight to my default response. You also need to show respect for different opinions and new ideas. And you have to have personal courage to push back against groupthink and going with the easy course of action. Okay, so that's how you apply those values into critical thinking. Now, you also have to think critically to truly and effectively solve problems. Consequently, you have to have integrity and respect, as well as know what you are and are not responsible for while you're going through the problem-solving process, while you're going through this process. You also have to be honest with yourself, which is often harder than we realize. Mission command requires us to be honest in order that and to show respect for others in order that they will trust us, and then that way they know that we have their backs and that they can then execute mission command effectively because they know we're trusting them. It also allows us then to execute mission command knowing that our leaders have our back when we assume risk. So again, all of the Army values lead into all of these traits that we need. And of course, clear communication depends also on adhering to the Army values. We have to respect others such that we communicate with them in mind. So what message are they hearing? Are we being clear? Are we ensuring they receive the correct message? We can't, as leaders or OCTs, act as if it's their responsibility to hear us correctly. We have to make sure that they are hearing the right message. The outcome that we're looking for is improved readiness, improved combat readiness, as those units that we're working with. Therefore, we have to ensure that they get the message that allows them to improve. So noted at the start, doing all of these things, living the Army values, thinking critically, solving problems, communicating effectively, and executing mission command, being a professional can improve your relationships, your job, your family, and your own happiness and contentedness. It's like snake oil, right? It's like, yeah, how do the Army values do that? The reason is that they reduce stress. So we typically experience stress because of the dissonance between our values and our actions. So every time we do something that's counter to our values, it creates stress and anxiety because we know internally, we may not be conscious of it, but we know something's off. Okay, so when we follow those Army values, we will find there are all these rewards, and we will also realize there are other ways to achieve the same outcomes that don't require us to compromise our integrity and our values. So let me also note right now, because I prepared before I got here, and then I was talking with Colonel Likas today, and he was telling me how you're really working, he's trying to get people to understand being a learning organization. You're working on, of course, Mission Command, you're doing MDMP. All the things I just talked about, they're the foundation for a learning organization. Okay? You cannot be a learning organization without doing those things that I talked about. The values, the mission command, the effective communication, the critical thinking, all of that is part of a learning organization. And those are built on the Army values. Same with mission command itself and the MDMP process. So when you're going through MDMP, you have to be doing all these things. If not, you're just going through the motions. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get the result everyone expected you to get at the start. Because we often do that, right? We start off, we're going through MDMP to decide on a course of action. Well, at the beginning, you've got some courses of action in your head already. And if you don't do the process properly and use these values, you'll end up with that exact same course of action, which of course reinforces the fact that you knew it at the beginning, so why do we do this? When in fact, if you went through the process correctly, you'd have come up with a better course of action at the end of the day. So let's get back to that injured boy in Syed Keel. So background, from August to November 2008, I served as the Deputy Team Chief for the Nangarhar Province Provincial Police Mentor Team. And my primary responsibility was to work directly with the Provincial Executive Officer, Colonel Amir Khan. Colonel Khan was a former Mujahideen. A lot of connections, a lot of power and influence in the area. Many people said that he was actually really more in charge than the actual police chief. And having worked with him for 3 months and even having dinner at his house, one of the better, nicer houses in Afghanistan, I would say they were probably correct. He didn't want to be the face of the police. He wanted to work behind the scenes getting things done. In November 2008, I took command of the police mentor team in Kunar province. Both Kunar and Nangarhar are right along the Pakistan border. Now, if you're familiar with the Korangal Valley, Restrepo, Kop Keating, the Battle of Ganjagal and Wanat, books such as Lone Survivor, The Outpost, and Into the Fire, they all occurred in Kunar around the time that our team was there. It was that team, 3 mentors, and our security force of 12, along with 2 interpreters, that was traveling from Asadabad to Jalalabad when one of our vehicles hit a young boy who ran out from between 2 cars parked along the side of the road. We immediately stopped. Our medics started to provide aid, but the boy needed more care than what we could provide. Our interpreters did a fantastic job of trying to keep things calm, but without communication, we had limited options and things were getting tense. So these are the sort of situations that can quickly escalate into chaos and a lead story on the national and international news. Then the armed Afghans arrived. Now, the armed Afghans were an Afghan National Police unit from Nangarhar province. Okay, but they weren't coming for us. They were driving through, saw what was going on. They didn't know us because we worked with the Kunar police, so they didn't know who we were. And in the middle of their convoy was a SUV with tinted windows. So it was really kind of a questionable situation a little bit. But then the window on the SUV rolled down, and there was Colonel Khan, my old buddy from Nangarhar, and he was on his way to a funeral with a police escort because he did have some enemies in the area. So exchanged some quick pleasantries with Colonel Khan because that's the way you do things in Afghanistan. And then I explained the situation. So Colonel Khan then helped calm the villagers, including the boy's family, quickly directed one of the police trucks to take the boy and a family member with us in our convoy to Fob Fenty, the Jalalabad airfield, which had a medical facility that could take care of him there. We got him there. He was treated for some fractures. Fortunately, did not have any serious injuries beyond that. And then we made sure he got home, and we went and followed up and visited with him a couple times. brought them some gifts, some food for the family, some things like that, to make sure that they were all right. A potential disaster became an opportunity for building goodwill through a calm response by my team and a relationship built on trust and mutual respect. Training to prepare for such situations may not be as much fun as training for large-scale force-on-force battle, but doing so may save more runs in the long run because it may avert the need to have actual battles with that live ammo and an aggressive enemy. Living the Army values 24/7 is not easy. It may not even be possible, but we can all make the effort. And when you find yourself facing a moral or ethical dilemma in which you need to compromise a value because you've got conflicting values, you can do so, but make sure you mitigate the compromise to the greatest extent possible. And when you do that, others around you are going to notice it. They'll notice that you are striving to do the right thing, even in the face of this dilemma. And oftentimes when you do that, you will find a better solution to whatever problem you are dealing with that doesn't force you to compromise your values. I know it sounds really hard or impossible, especially when it seems so many others don't bother. But it is possible if you remind yourself it's a reflection of your core values rather than the impression you're trying to make on others. So you have a tough job as OCTs, but one that's absolutely critical to the readiness of units participating in CSTX. Make the choice to do that job as a professional, and I strongly encourage you to also make the choice to carry that over to other places in your life. Now, in saying all these things, I know there are people here tonight who are struggling. They may be suffering from depression, PTSD, other mental health issues. There may be some folks who are not here tonight from your unit, I don't know, who are not here in part because they're struggling with such issues. Before anyone who is struggling in such a way can try to worry about living by the code that I talked about tonight, they have to be pulled out of that darkness and despair. They need to feel some sense of hope, just a glimmer of hope. Each of us can provide that glimmer by contributing to a culture of trust and a sense of family, which I've felt tonight, which is awesome. As leaders, demonstrate vulnerability by admitting your own shortcomings and mistakes, and demonstrate strength by standing up to anyone who threatens that culture of trust in your family. I've been in units with a poor command climate where the leaders were looking out for themselves and there was very little trust and camaraderie. Fortunately, most of my career has been in units with leaders who sustain cultures of true vulnerability-based trust. I felt I could approach leadership or my colleagues with whatever problems or concerns I had, and I strive to always build such a culture on the teams and units that I led. I hope you have and contribute to such culture here. Actually, I've seen it. You have a lot of that culture here, and I hope you will be proactive in making it even stronger. I also hope you will be proactive in reaching out to your brothers and sisters to make sure they know you truly have their backs no matter what challenges they face. And know that there are literally thousands of organizations out there around the country who are ready and able to help service members and veterans facing nearly any challenge. Your team and units are your family, and the Army is your extended family. We can't always control our extended family, so don't be afraid to show your love for your family and even to say it once in a while. So, Colonel Likas, Chris, I love you, brother. All right. Our country is in dire need of leaders with integrity who have the personal courage to do what's right, the right way, and for the right reasons. Will you be one of those leaders? Thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you tonight, to be part of your family for the night. Best wishes to all of you on your careers and your future endeavors. Thank you.